I'm Dean from West Recruitment, and we're lucky enough to be sitting here today with Sheridan Ware, who's the CIO of the Year for 2023. Sheridan, welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
It's good to have you here. Obviously, a lot of people would know you out in, I guess, the public sphere at the moment for winning the CIO of the Year for 2023. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that award and how that came about?
Yeah, it's really funny, and I think any CIO that was on stage that night would tell you the same thing, which is it's not really an award for you. It's an award for the amazing things that your team and your company have done. But it is kind of fun to be the front man of the band, so to speak. We won that award on a number of fronts, and this is what I really love about the award is certainly there was a technology component to it. You don't get in looking on that award unless you've done something that has helped your company move forward and transform in some way, and we'd won that for the help and enablement we'd given our retail department as they sought to create a better experience for our retail tenants and create more efficiencies in the business. But we also won it for the broader impact that we had, not just within Charter Hall, but also the wider property industry. So things like, diversity and inclusion within our own team, but also particularly in LGBT plus inclusion across the property industry. We've done some really interesting work there.
So if we could unpack that in a little bit more detail, what did that look like in terms of your technology team? And then how did you then take that concept or initiative and spread that into the wider property industry?
Yeah, it was actually a real joy that I was asked to be the executive sponsor of CH Proud, which was our internal group for LGBT plus inclusion. And so our original starting point was really how do we actually make sure that we create an inclusive space for LGBT plus people at Charter Hall. And we had such great inroads there, but that's really just the table stakes of doing inclusion. We had this fantastic opportunity to help lead the property industry on thinking through specific issues like gender inclusive bathrooms. And then when World Pride came to our shores, I think 2 years ago, we led the charge in getting, or our teams led the charge in getting the other property owners, particularly those that own buildings across the domain where the opening and closing ceremonies were, to light up those buildings in a rainbow. It was a show of support for the people from all over the world that were coming to celebrate World Pride. We also had 4 of the 45 selected artworks for the Rainbow City program that was a key part of World Pride. We lit up all of our properties like a rainbow and really showed our support. We marched in the Mardi Gras, we just did a lot of stuff, and it was so joyful, right? It was probably one of the favourite things that I did in my career. I called it my gay job. It was on top of my day job, but I loved it. But we also did a bunch of work with the Property Council on their cybersecurity roundtable, not just to lift the tide of the boat, which is Charter Hall, but also to lift the tide for all boats, particularly smaller players in the property industry that don't have the type of resources available to them that someone the likes of Charter Hall has. And then I think the final pillar in that win was the work that we were doing on sustainable digitalization, which is how do we build frameworks and guidance to ensure that we're using technology and data in ways that are ethical and responsible and sustainable, which I loved so much that I'm now the chair of the Sustainable Digitalization Project and taking it forward. So, I think that there was a lot of components to winning that award, but it's obviously a point of pride that other people, someone external has recognised the achievements of the broader team.
Absolutely.
Making all of those things happen.
And I don't think it probably gets the credit it deserves in terms of, the perception is, okay, you built a fantastic app, which I think was automated, and you've done some really, really great tech stuff, and the business is innovating, which is great. I think every business has a transformation or innovation agenda at the moment. That's okay. So how do you sort of narrow down as to which ones are the ones you would nominate for the award and whatnot? But it sounds like there's so many more facets that would come into play that really make it really, as a CIO, more all-encompassing and more people-led. And I think that's where the key is. It's not just about the technology. I think people drive all of this. Yeah. Being a judge for 2024 now, what would you look for in potential applicants that might sort of help them stand out?
It is that leadership, right? of course, we should be doing the technology and we should be doing that well. We should be helping to transform how businesses serve customers, how businesses operate, the insights that can be generated, definitely. And then I think it's that final piece, that translation piece. How do we actually take everything we know about the opportunities that are available through technology and data and help to translate that into what's actually possible? Can we expand our idea of what's possible and then lean into other areas where you can make a difference, like diversity and inclusion? We still have a way to go in making sure that technology and the broader business environment is diverse and inclusive.
I think technology has probably the biggest challenge in terms of diversity and gender imbalance out of most departments. It's like, you're right, how do we attract different people to this industry because it is booming?
1,000%, and there's so many opportunities, and I don't think, certainly not when I was growing up, technology wasn't an option because it was seen as quite technical and it didn't really float my boat. But
it was almost a mysterious dark box and no one knew how it worked.
The geeks went, you know, and that's just not technology these days. Sure, there's technical roles within technology, but I don't think, and certainly my experience in my career, the technologist is more, the CIO is more of a translator than a technologist. And I do think we have broader areas that we can play in, like climate change. We're not going to get to net zero without technology. What's our role in really painting what's possible when it comes to, you know, technology-enabled change?
It's funny, the energy sector at the moment, it is hot because there's so much innovation and change. And you think about electricity hasn't changed in 100 years, how they generate that. So, you know, you're right, all of these, you know, industries are being affected and impacted, but I think technology is going to drive that change, especially around climate, looking at data, what is the climate doing, understanding what it is. So there is a lot of opportunity there, but it's funny, we're almost at the cusp of such a huge amount of change. And if you're looking at like the role of the CIO, you know, 5 to 10 years ago, it's changed from where it sits right now. And it's changing again to you know, as the corporate landscape changes. So, I mean, in 2024, what do you think the role of a CIO looks like?
I think it is to deeply understand the business model. So how do we make money? How do we spend money? Where does our time get used? And then within all of the above, like, what do we stand for our customers, our suppliers, our broader community? And in that space, be able to translate what are the opportunities for technology, not just to make the organization more efficient or faster, but how do we deliver insights that drive a more personalized customer experience? How do we create more self-service and seamlessness that drives a better customer experience? How do we become easier to deal with for our suppliers? What's the broader impact we want to have on our community? Like, you have to be able to speak that language, because talking about keeping the lights on isn't an executive level conversation and not a board level conversation either. So you do have to be able to speak first in the language of what matters to the business that you're operating in. And then the table stakes needs to just be done and done well.
It's funny, every business is a technology business in some form.
Yeah, I've always pushed back a little on that. It's like I mean, I've got a strong specialization in real estate, but there was this time when there were certain companies saying we're a technology business, not a real estate business. And I think, no, you're just a business that uses more technology than your competitors. But so I don't know whether every business is a technology business, but I think if you're not, if a digital culture and a digital mindset and the use of digital technologies and data isn't deeply embedded in everything that you do, you're a dinosaur and potentially you're going to be extinct, right? So, I don't. A lot of businesses are still sitting on their hands and waiting. And I don't think, you know, if we look back in history at how, say, the Fortune 100 has changed over time and how many of the companies that were on the Fortune 100 15 years ago actually exist right now, I think we should be very scared of not deeply embedding not just digital tools and tech and data, but really scared about not developing a digital mindset.
But that's an interesting point you make too, because I think when you look at the way that things have changed in terms of digitalisation and touch. There's a lot of businesses that want to see what their competitors are doing. And I think the fear of jumping too soon, it's almost like a push and pull motivation. And I think some companies are waiting to see what works really well, then, okay, we'll get onto that. But I think the pace that things are moving, by the time they migrate onto whatever they think is the next big thing, it's come and gone. Or there's better ways of doing things. And it's...
I mean, you should never be using technology just for technology's sake. And I don't really believe in following the leader. I don't believe in big transformation projects either, strangely enough. Okay. I believe in breaking things down into digestible chunks that you can chew with the benefit of improving, but also of just learning. It's like AI right now. You don't have to go and fund a massive AI transformation, but jump in, choose a few experiments, test and learn, because being on the journey is far more important than trying to define a perfect destination, because that destination is going to change anyway.
It evolves. Yeah, it's always evolving. Oh, that's really interesting. So you think maybe more technology is more around simplifying and streamlining what you do, and that's its core function, as opposed to just having maybe some complex technology for technology's sake.
Oh, definitely never technology for technology's sake. I do think, well, even in technology environments have become incredibly complicated as we've added more technology for technology's sake on top of each other. Actually, I think we're in a really interesting point in time where we should look to simplify, pull technology out of our stacks wherever possible, try to streamline our environment, because it's in streamlined, simplified environments that you'll be able to adapt and move really, really quickly.
That worked best.
Time to clean out shop, I think.
That's really interesting. Now, I'm going to take you back, I guess, in terms of your early parts of your career. So tell me, what drew you to IT as a career choice initially?
So it's a really fun fact. The only thing I ever wanted to do when I was a kid, nothing else got a look in, was I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to tell people the news.
Right.
And so literally nothing got a look in. I went straight to journalism school. So my undergraduate degree was in radio and TV journalism, which by the end of my degree, the one thing I knew was I never wanted to be a journalist. So I was like, what am I going to do?
So it was a real crossroads for you when you got your studies and everything in your life to that point.
It had led to that moment.
Yeah, right.
And that moment wasn't the right moment for me. It was literally just something I didn't want to do. So that was the first pivot, it was to say, if not this, then what? And at the time, and this will age me, but the dot-com boom was on, right? So it was sort of like the late 90s. And so I jumped in and I became an online journalist. It was not really a proper job title at the time, but I was like, I'm going to write for websites and see where that takes us, because I had this sort of, I'm quite a principled person, but I had this view that maybe if people had voices through the internet, that we would have a more democratic society, and I wanted to play a part in that game. But because it was a dot-com boom, right, like you could change your job title every other month. So I think I was a journalist for about 3 months, and then I became a producer on the website, working with all the other writers to produce the content while I kind of directed traffic. And then the dot-com crash happened really quickly after that.
Yes.
And it was just about survival, like trying to keep our part of the business alive. And the way that we did that was to say, stuff the website that has all of this content on it. Let's go and sell the content management solution, which was kind of like a dummy interface that even I could use to publish the content onto the website. And so we went and sold that to not-for-profit organizations, government, corporates. Like, we just went out and sold this content.
So you knocked on doors to
save this company.
Wow.
Right? So, well, our part of the company at least. And then, and so we did do that. And then overnight I became like a project manager. I was running like these $1 million projects.
So it fell into your lap.
Totally.
By pushing, okay, so like who tapped you on the shoulder for that?
Well, it was just because there was no one else to do it. So because in that time you just kind of wore multiple hats. It was like being in a startup, but in reverse. We went from being a reasonably sized team to being very few people doing everything.
Yeah, siege mentality.
And what a great experience to have early in your career, like to have to actually back to the wall, just fight. Like I've never, like the camaraderie I built with that team. All of those people are still my friends.
I was going to say, you'd be galvanized like war buddies. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
And
so then we're rolling these out. And so the other hat I wore all of a sudden was I became a change manager, but change management.
Before change management. Yeah. Okay.
And so I was like, I'm at one point we were rolling out our content management system across governments in regional Victoria. And so we're like literally on the road, driving around to Bendigo and Ballarat, and training people, some of which didn't even know what a browser was. They
didn't have computers at home, no internet.
Totally. And you'd watch these poor people going, my mind has just been blown. What is this that I'm looking at, you know? And you're trying to teach them to use a content management solution. And then I realized, actually, this wouldn't be so hard if we just designed the technology so it was intuitive for people to use. So I became what was then termed a user experience designer.
Okay.
As well. I just researched the hell out of it, learned everything I could. I was just like a big sponge. And I started to design not just interfaces, but also interactions that people were having in technology to vastly reduce the amount of training that we had to do.
And at what point did you go...
Could you just lean backwards? Sorry, I sort of come out.
Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
You're all good.
Sorry, do you want me to start that again? Do you want me to start that from?
You were just about to start a question.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Let's go through your question.
At what point did you decide, okay, I found it, this is what I want to do?
It was then.
Yeah.
Right. When you see people light up because they just intuitively understand something and you've just either created a new opportunity for them or made what they currently do easier, that's what lit me up. And I was so lit up that I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my career.
So how long did you do that role for?
I actually pivoted into a user experience role in a different company.
Right.
They kind of just created this role and I kind of morphed it to be my own. And we started doing user experience on really significant projects. Like at one point we did the largest e-learning platform in the country when e-learning was just becoming a thing.
Wow.
We did like multiple website redevelopments and like had so much fun. And it was at that point that I actually decided to step away and do my master's degree. So I did an MBA.
Yep. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'd started the MBA because I was working for a company called CPA Australia and they were doing some really innovative stuff. They were excellent at training and development for their own people as a training and development organisation itself for the accounting and business professions. So they started putting me through an MBA while I was still working.
Well, CBA Australia was doing great things, I think, probably around that time when they started advertising on television, trying to attract accountants to the profession and things like that. So as a former accounting recruiter, I can tell you I know CPA Australia really well. And just, what a well-regarded organisation they are, but also too how well-structured they are and whatnot. And I think they're very seen as like, it's accounting, but it's very commercial as well.
And I think at least at that time, which is many years ago now, they were really serious about taking young people and actually giving them a pathway to senior leadership. And so I got some really good, out of some of the transformation work we did, some really good exposure to senior leaders who then actually saw the massive inroads that we'd made on these big projects and how successful they had been. And how they'd transformed not just the technology, but the broader organisation. And they're like, this user experience stuff, can we actually apply it like on technology things? And I'm like, I don't see why not. We started looking at core processes in the business and how we can design them in a much more human-centred way. And so after doing my, I should say, my partner at the time got an incredible job offer in Shanghai. So I decided to just take the risk and go and finish my MBA full-time in China.
Not many people can say they've done that. So was it a huge culture shock over there to do that? I mean, obviously, doing it full-time, you leaned right into it. You said, look, I'm going to obviously tackle this head on. But what was your key? What did you learn from that you went, helped you sort of further on in your career that maybe you wouldn't have if you didn't do it?
Yeah, it was my first time. Oh, actually, it was my second time living overseas. I lived in London for a short period of time, but London wasn't for me. China is very, very different. And it was one of the best things that I ever did for my broader leadership career, because I realized just how blunt our culture can be and how in that environment, an ability to adapt to influence in a different way than I would in a normal Australian organisation was really beneficial in my adaptation in general. I just have such an incredible network as a result of studying with people from all over the world. And learning about China being the powerhouse that it was and is becoming in the world, I think it can only serve you well. So,
culturally, very, very different things done there, and the corporate landscape there to here. And yeah.
And somehow the compare and contrast helps you understand your own culture and your own country a whole lot better. So I mean, I'm deeply grateful for the time that I spent both in Shanghai and then later on in Hong Kong. And you know, couldn't recommend enough taking time out of Australia. And if you can find an opportunity for an overseas appointment, I think it really, really was a joy in life as well as from my career.
It's definitely. I've never heard anybody come back and say I absolutely hated it.
No,
so it was, you live and learn, and
times, right?
Yeah,
like you get lonely, and you kind of do feel like a fish out of water. But that's where the growth is, right? You grow so deeply as a person, especially when English isn't the first language and you're trying to learn a language. And I'm really bad at learning.
It's humbling, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you finished your MBA. What was the role that you took after that?
So it's amazing how the universe provides opportunities, right? I knew I didn't want to go straight back and do what I was doing in technology. And weirdly, through friends, I met the CEO of this, the regional CEO of this global, massive real estate organization. And we were talking about human-centered design. And he, at the end of the conversation, he basically said, I'm not entirely sure that I understand what this is, but it sounds really interesting. Would you like to come on and set up my 5-year strategic plan with this human-centered stuff in driving it? And I was like, well, I suppose.
So that's like a brief conversation, and now he's trusting you with the strategic direction of the business for a 5-year plan.
I'd never written a strategy at a business level. I'd written plenty of technology strategy, and especially with a human-centered lens. But, I think you've got to back yourself, right? And so I just pivoted again. I learned everything I could about commercial real estate. I wrote that 5-year plan with the rest of the strategy people around the world. I loved it so much that a 6-month contract turned into 12 years, right? Wow. I stayed on to implement that strategy. We redesigned the whole way the organization was structured, the whole way that it valued the products that it had, the way that it talked to clients, the way it sold, the way that we delivered services. We went top to bottom.
So the influence you had over that, for that brief conversation, was just massive. It changed that business for, the way it operated. But how, when you first joined that team, what were the strategy people? Because obviously you would have been a bit of a mystery, like human-centered design. What does that mean from a strategy people? Like, we know what strategy is, but how do you incorporate the two? Was there any sort of push and pull, or did they understand what you were trying to achieve, or were they very on board, or did you have to really influence them to go, no, this is the way?
It was there wasn't a lot of resistance to it, because the greatest thing about human-centered design is that we're all humans, so we kind of intrinsically get it. And it seems so obvious once you start to apply the techniques of human-centered design. But it is still a journey, right? Because answers fall out, and we have to collectively own those answers. We can't just rush to solutions, right? And so the things that we ended up doing, we did collectively. And once you do them, they kind of, everyone looked at it and goes, that's so obvious. Why didn't we always do it that way? But it is the techniques of human-centered design that can help you get there. But now a lot of those people are proponents of human-centered design as well, right?
Just by default, you've rubbed off on them.
Yeah.
Well, they've seen the light and the way things can be done.
100%.
So what role were you doing when you moved on?
So actually, I was at a crossroads. I sort of had moved back to Sydney. after 7 years in Shanghai, we kind of was done with the big heavy uplift on the strategy work, and I was like, I think I'm going to go back and do a role in technology. And, what a great company. They were like, actually, there's work to be done in Australia, setting up whole new service lines and business units. Do you want to help out with that until you work out what you want to do? And I was like, yeah, great, I'll do that. And that just gives me time to make the right decision. And then I was back here about a year and a half, still trying to work out what that decision should be. And they said, well, actually, for your sins, do you want to go run the technology department? And technology had always been, weirdly, as we're doing all of that transformation, the hardest business unit to get on board with the transformation. And I was like, yeah, why not? Because there's so much stuff we never really did at the technology level because the technology team wasn't as open as they could have been. So be careful what you wish for, hey?
That's good to say. It says like influencing people is harder than...
But I got a chance to do human-centered design all over again because I was then part of a global leadership team where I could bring some of that toolkit into the...
Drive change. Yeah.
But not long after I took the CIO gig, Cushman & Wakefield merged with a company called DTZ under the leadership of a private equity organisation. And anyone that's done a private equity merger, probably knows how difficult they can be. But essentially, we got given 3 years to rip and replace everything, all the core infrastructure, all the core applications that the business had. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it was the largest merger that had ever happened in commercial real estate history. So the company that was Cushman & Wakefield went from 12,000 people to 50,000 people overnight.
That's huge.
Massive. So, and I've just become a CIO. So you can imagine.
What were you feeling at the
time? Total fear, terror. Terror.
I was going to say, you just like, at some point you might have sat there and went, what have I got myself into? Like,
but after I had to jump through the hoop of, do I even have a job anymore, right? Because there's like
the direction.
3 people that could be the CIO in this new organisation because of the 2 companies and other companies at the same time coming together.
Yep.
Like, why would they give the role to me when I've got the least technical or technology experience in the room? And so, but that was what was cool about human-centered design, right? No one else had that. And if we're going to design diverse and inclusive teams, we have to have...
That was your superpower.
It's my superpower.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we had, probably it literally was the busiest 3 years of my life. I worked from 5 a.m. until 10 or 11 every night.
Wow.
I was on, planes and crossing the international date line every other month. Like, I didn't know whether I was Arthur or Martha for those 3 years. We did a lot. Actually, the private equity group was saying it usually takes 7 years to do what we did in less than 3.
If private equity guys are saying you're working hard, let me tell you, you're working hard. Most guys don't.
I wish that we'd gotten the kind of awards that the private equity guys had gotten.
The buyouts, yeah, absolutely.
But we took that company, we went IPO. It was I think any organisation that grows and transforms that fast becomes a different organisation. I was, if I'm really honest, very burnt out, like medically burnt out. And I just decided to redesign my life. I came back to Australia. I took my role at Charter Hall. It was like a fantastic organisation. I was in love at first sight. I loved the leadership team. I jumped in feet first with Charter Hall, came back to Australia, and certainly worked less hours.
Well, I think that would have been a prerequisite if you wouldn't have much left to keep going.
Yeah.
In terms of your first CIO role, it sounds like you had so much happening at the time because it was a huge remit. Businesses, going gangbusters. They're growing. Your remit is just to basically re-engineer everything from the ground up. How did you make that transition into the CIO role? Obviously, you had the outcomes you had to achieve, but what was the attributes or things that you needed to focus on to help you be successful as a CIO?
I think the first thing that made it possible was just having really good networks, because I'd had that opportunity, right, in doing strategy and strategy rollout to have really good networks and relationships with the most senior people in that organisation. And I think that made it a clear pathway to getting onto the executive committee. That was absolutely critical. I think understanding that business inside and out from a strategy level really helped me to understand where the opportunities were with technology and how to talk about them in ways that were impactful and meaningful and that people could engage with.
And when you identified that and you went to the other execs and said, here's my plan, this is what I'm saying, were they like, oh yeah, we knew about that stuff, that does need to be fixed? Or were they like, oh, okay, this is really, this is a really good plan. Like, this is that you've had like a vision or seen things that maybe they didn't recognise or didn't see.
I think in both CIO roles, there's a bit of both. I mean, the table stake stuff around service desk and infrastructure and core applications, all that stuff. Everyone knows where the problems are.
And the limitations, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And where you can bring that up to a certain standard and even go beyond that standard, great. But that's not what's going to keep you at that executive table. I think it is that seeing where the business is going and even being able to expand what might be possible in terms of where the business is going, that's the stuff, right? That's the stuff, that translation that you need to be able to do.
Getting the others excited and on the bus. Did you have to find that, when you're starting to work with like board, CEOs, obviously a lot of people in their careers, especially from a technology background, they'd be really intimidated just by that reporting line or that communication line. How did you approach that in a different way? Like, did you say, oh, look, I need to alter my communication style or my presentation style? Because there's such a stigma about, okay, no, you need to communicate in a certain way to be successful or to gain trust or whatnot. Did you find that you had to change it, or that just came naturally to you?
I think it changed over time. I think as I've gotten older and wiser, I've learned that you're at that table because people believe that you're the right person to be there. And so I think I've shifted from being that person of I have to communicate in a certain way and it has to be quite rigid and you have to know all the answers and putting myself under a lot of pressure to actually, I've just authentically got to be me. Yeah. And I think especially when it comes to board level conversation and sometimes executive level conversation, the hardest and the coolest thing about being a CIO is that you're the newest kid on the block, right? You have this opportunity and it's really joyful to try to educate people about the art of the possible and to educate people about what these technology trends mean and how they relate to what we do. So unlike maybe some of the other more traditional functions where executives, board members have always had that exposure and have even come up through those lines themselves, you are the new kid on the block.
They're almost groomed into it, aren't they?
Totally. Whereas, like, we know, everyone knows their ways around the financial statements. You're not at the executive table unless you know your way around the financial statements and how they get compiled or what the controls are and all that jazz. Yeah. But it's a little different in your space, and I think we have to embrace that difference.
Absolutely. Well, it's very, I think we were talking about it earlier. So, sitting on an exec team or even on a board 10 years ago, it was just unheard of. Like, it just didn't happen, right? And now people have recognised that where technology is such a critical part of any business, that it's gone from being, okay, we just need someone that can keep the lights on or a business enabler to really something that will allow us to drive the business. And you're right, you talk about the what's possible. And I think that is the role of the CIO, is to say, well, look, this is the state of play now, but this is where we see it heading. And this is how we would get there if we wanted to go down that path. But this is what that means for us as an organisation. And some really embrace change and others are scared of what that might mean, or it'll be too disruptive or it'll hurt our business or whatnot. So I think a CIO will say, well, no, it won't. This is what it's going to look like.
And I often hypothesize, well, I'm always hypothesizing about the future in some way, but in terms of the future role of the CIO, my hypothesis has been that actually CIOs shouldn't be required in the future, because every executive sitting at that table should have such a keen understanding of digital and data that they don't actually need somebody else holding that hat. So, and certainly something we were working to at Charter Hall was this embedded model. How do we, instead of having people come to the technology team to do the work, how is it that we embed technology expertise in every single part of the business, such that every executive doesn't know if it's an IT person sitting in their team or one of their people. I mean, that was our vision. And I think that's maybe the CIO role doesn't exist in the future, but CIOs become strategy people.
Well, the execs, you're right. I think you can have an exec that's got a technology background now because, again, the role of the CIO in the past of the head of IT hasn't really been, look, you don't have to be financially savvy. You don't have to really understand the drivers in a P&L. But now you do. You absolutely do.
Totally.
So you can't not be a finance person as well as a technology person, as well as a business person or a business person. And I think what you were saying, though, to just sort of go back to your point, communicating with these other execs, I think, being your authentic self is fantastic because there's a lot of people out there that, well, no, I can't really be that culturally I won't fit. I won't fit into that organisation. I won't fit in with these people. So I need to change. They don't have time for people to talk about things that are not nonsensical or they take too long. So I've got to just cut to the point and this and that. And I think to enable yourself to be a trusted advisor to those execs, and that's really what they're looking for. They need to know who you are.
Yeah.
And I think if you are yourself, they'll get there a lot quicker and they'll have that level of trust because they know who they're dealing with. Yeah. Not, someone's telling me what I want to hear because they think that's what I want to hear. So that was a really interesting point. I think that would be a good lesson for anybody sort of looking to make that step up. What sort of challenges do you think are in the future for us? I mean, we're talking about like Gen Z entering the workforce, all these different disruptions. As a CIO, do you think the challenge is keeping current or relevant, or do you think there'd be something more, front of mind or topical that so people need to sort of prepare for?
Maybe this is a personal bent of mine, and something that I've learned in my career. But I don't see it as a challenge, but it's certainly an opportunity. You've got like Gen Y and now Gen Z to come into the workplace. These generations, God love them, are so much more purposeful. Right? They don't want to work in organisations that don't tie to what they believe in, particularly when it comes to things like diversity and inclusion and climate change. And I think it's not enough anymore to be technically good at what you do as a leader. I think you've got to be able to engage and inspire them around the things that matter and to be able to show them how what they're doing, even if it is a more entry-level role, ultimately contributes to authentically moving forward in some of those ways, that purpose, and understanding what is your purpose and how are you authentic and even vulnerable in sharing that purpose and your journey and where things got wrong and what you've learned along the way. How do you actually authentically and vulnerably connect with your people? How do you engage and include them in not just sharing information and inspiring, but having this two-way dialogue that helps them shape that future in organizations? And how do you give up some of that control, right? Everyone, the one thing that I tell my teams all the time is I'm like, the thing is, the more that you move up the organization, there's a point at which you lose all control, right? All of your your leadership team, they're the ones that get to do the fun stuff. They're the ones that get to control the majority of the budget. They're the ones that get to control how work gets done. Your job is just to influence, right? You actually have zero control, right? When you're the CIO. It's a real joyful job, right? Your job is to actually connect with people and understand what's in their heads and their hearts. Where do they want to go and how can you help them get there? Yeah. But it's just a lot of, influencing and translating. It's not, people have this view that suddenly you get to make all the decisions, actually get to make no decisions at all anymore. And so...
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective on that because it's not what most people think happens.
Totally.
Brings me on to the next topic, and I want to talk to you about leadership. So I think as a leader yourself, you talk about influencing and inspiring and engaging. How did you develop your style? And I think the lead into that is, did you model it off someone you worked for? Did you develop it yourself as someone you wanted to work for? Okay, hypothetically, I would love to work for someone that was like this, and then you sort of shaped your style after that? Or was there just an absolute person that just inspired you from a leadership perspective to go, well, this is what good looks like?
I think in my whole career, I'm just like a pirate. I've been like sailing on the high seas, stealing anything that I like. I just steal it as my own, right? So it was probably a series of leaders. And the one thing I've been so lucky to have in my career is incredible leaders around me, not just that have opened doors and given me opportunities, but have modeled what humility looks like, what vulnerability looks like, what authenticity looks like, and helped me shape what are the things that have felt good in terms of the leaders that I've had around me, and how do I pay that forward for other people. So I feel like the role of a leader is not to have people be in service of them, it's to be in service of others. And I've just been so lucky to have that modeled around me time and time again. In the different sort of leaders that I had and different managers that I've had.
So you picked and pulled to develop your own style.
Yeah, because it can't be that you just steal somebody else's style.
Oh, no.
You have to find the bits that feel really, like what lights you up about their leadership, and how do you actually start crafting that as part of your signature style as well.
Everybody has that one person they work for that they're like, I really enjoyed my time working for that person. And then conversely, sometimes I know in my own career, I've worked for people, I'm like, I'm going to be the absolute opposite of that.
Oh, there was definitely there's only been one, but I was, and weirdly a female leader. And I was like, the last thing as a female leader I ever want to be is I never want to behave and make people feel that way. And so...
but looking back now, do you see that as maybe a coping mechanism?
Totally, I think, and I felt it too, right? As sort of like I climbed the ladder, there was a point where I felt like I had to be a badass in order to be respected as a leader.
Yep.
And it felt wrong. It felt like I was wearing somebody else's clothes. And I'm like, and then I had this experience earlier in my career of being bullied by a female leader. And I'm like, it's not me. And if that's what it takes to fit in, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, it's not for me.
And so I just started building out what authentically lit me up and felt like, so when you do something good for somebody, it pays you back tenfold in how good you feel about yourself. And so how do I actually do that in my own leadership style? And so service has been a really big thing. How do I actually be of service, not just to my team, but to my organisation, to other people's teams, to the broader community? How do I live a life of service? Because a life of service will pay you back.
It's rewarding in itself.
Rewarding.
Yeah, and it's funny because you're talking about authenticity and humility, and vulnerability is a big one.
Yeah.
Traditionally in leadership, that's always been like, no, we don't share your weaknesses, no way. But I mean, you see the businesses and the leaders that embrace that now are the ones that are really doing great things in business.
Yeah.
And I think that the market has shifted, that people don't want to work for people that they aren't honest enough about their shortcomings, or and a really good leader is a person that rallies people around them and is on their level. It's not a person that sort of sits above them in the hierarchy and goes, you need to do this because this is how it's done, and that's because I say. Like, people don't buy into that anymore. That's not the style.
Yeah, there's very few times that I'll take a captain's call on things, right? But it's true. I had this really liberating moment, like probably, 4 or 5 years ago as a leader, where I realised my job was never to have answers. My job was to ask really smart questions.
That's interesting.
And so what I found was I was robbing people of the learning opportunity by always being the one that spoke up. And I went through this period where I was like, Sheridan, leader speaks last. And it's hard for me because I always want to say something. I love it. And so leader speaks last. I have to just shut up, because as soon as you have to realize your power as a leader, as soon as you have an opinion, that becomes everybody's opinion. So it's really important not to have an opinion and instead ask smart questions that allow people to make the solution their own, to learn along the way, and to be there to support and guide, but to not actually direct. Like, that became really important.
And that allows people to get buy-in because they own it. They feel like that's, okay, this is what I, and they're well supported and empowered to own it.
Buy-in, engagement, like that's how you get people to love what they do. Then they create amazing solutions and they grow.
Well, it's funny. The next question I was going to ask you was, how do you get your best out of your teams? But I think you've just covered that.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's it's the secret sauce. If you do it well, it pays dividends really quickly. But also too, people want to work for you.
Yeah, totally.
Because they feel like they're listened to, they're contributing, they're part of the journey.
And also seen, one of the things, and this was for me during COVID, I was at home and I was by myself, and I think we all had a different experience of COVID, but all the bubble people that lived in their bubble by themselves, it was really hard. It was really lonely. It took a real toll on mental health. It was the ability to be vulnerable about things like that as well, that helps your team be seen. The number of conversations I had with similar people who said, I'm feeling the same way, this is making me depressed or anxious. Like the way that you can actually bring your whole self to work and be seen starts with you allowing yourself to be seen, you know?
Did you find that during COVID, that like I'm not talking to a boss, I'm talking to another person? It's not, do you know what I mean? It's not, it wasn't that like, hey, we're in this together. If the world goes to muck, which at one point I think everybody, if you turn the news on, you thought that was absolutely going to happen. We're all just people. We're just struggling to get through it. Doesn't matter what job you do. Like, we're all experiencing similar things. Some are better than others. And it was really, like, you look back now and it seems like it was ancient history, but it was such a scary time for, I think, everybody, that now coming out of that, it shaped the style, it shaped the way people work. People still aren't coming back to the office 5 days because that's not that world anymore. You don't need to. People
We're proving that we didn't need to.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And I think now, as we talk about what future work looks like, it's going to be very, very different because nobody says, well, this is the standard anymore. There's different things for different people. And it's funny now we see people that are really good at, hey, I'm smart at night. Other people are early birds. You can still work in the same business and it's a bit like ships of the night. You never cross paths, but you both get your work done and you're highly effective in your roles.
Oh my God, we could do a whole podcast around future of work. I mean, I love this topic and I think it's still playing out and so much good stuff. And let's take the learnings from COVID.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's the world's changed the world. Last question on leadership. When you're looking to hire someone for your team, what do you look for?
Oh, 1,000% what's in their heart. Okay. So I went through like a deeply vulnerable job description writing situation where I just, like job descriptions are so bland. And we actually started to rewrite them around what we aspire to do, what impact we could have on climate change, what impact we can have on diversity and inclusion, what impact we can have on the future of work and the return to offices. Like we just started to really speak and understand the impact that we could have. And in those moments, we had we were able to magnetize people to us that we like, how on earth is this person interested in working in commercial property? And when those people turned up for interviews, the reason they were magnetized is they were connected with their hearts and the impacts that they could have in the world. And we're looking for that. Like skills for me, there has to be enough to be able to do the job effectively, of course. But it is in your heart too, because I don't want people just that turn up to get a paycheck. I want people that turn up wanting to change the world and make it a better place for all the other humans around them. And that's what I'm looking for. That's my je ne sais quoi. When I am hiring people, and the one thing that I love doing is hiring people. And honestly, CIO of the year, my greatest achievement was the team that I hired at Charter Hall. They are exceptional.
Yeah.
And they all, in their own way, believe in creating a better world. And like when you turn up and you work like that, it doesn't feel like work, right? Because you are actually doing something that's bigger than you and bigger than the sum of your parts. So, yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
It's funny, putting my recruitment hat on, the amount of businesses that don't see a job description as an opportunity to sell their organisation and their purpose. It's just a shopping list. Just, you need to come here and do this, and if you do, this is what your background is, and this is what you'll get. It's like, they're missing a trick.
Why when people turn up for a job interview, they're not
inspired.
They're nervous. They're not there to tell you what change they want to create in the world, and all the work that we did, particularly in diversity and inclusion. I was moved to tears in some interviews with people like, I'm here because I have a transgender child and I've seen all the great work that you guys have done. I mean, I'll get teary thinking about it and just talking about it now. Like, you just realize that there are always opportunities to be of service, and I'm looking for people that want to be of service.
I think it's a really worldly, community-minded way of building a team, as opposed to just come here and do your job. So,
we're at the 50-minute mark.
Great. No, that's fine. I think we'll tie this off in an hour. The next question I wanted to ask you is, obviously you've been approached now, you're sitting on boards, and there's a lot of people career-minded, they see that as the pinnacle, that, okay, once you've really seen as a market specialist or really good in your field, that if you're wanting to get onto a board, that is like, okay, that's like the end goal. What advice would you give to somebody that says that this is where they want to be, like on a board, advisory subject specialist, like, is it would you say encouraged to go into organisations that you could offer something to, or how would you advise them to go about?
Probably, like, I'm on a charity board right now. It's a volunteer position and organisation. I think the first piece of advice is do what makes you happy and lights you up. I feel like we all get caught in this trap of trying to say, well, that's the next available option. Don't go on boards unless you love governance and strategy. Like, if that's not what lights you up, don't aim for that. It's something that is an acquired skill, it's really hard to break into your first board professional gig. Network. Go and try a volunteer organisation in an area that lights you up. Give it a go. Start to build out a portfolio, certainly is the advice that has been given to me, of board positions. And then as that grows, potentially opportunities for it to be a paid career option open up. But it's not something that I'm actively exploring. I'm on a board.
So it fell into your lap because you're in the... Yeah. And I think
I believe in the cause, right? Yeah. Like, I really believe in the cause.
That makes an appointment really easy because they know that you're bought into what they're trying to achieve and you've got the best interest for the organisation.
Totally.
So the one of the last questions I've got here is, as a female in the tech industry, what do you think the industry can do better to attract more females? I'm a girl dad.
Oh, I love that.
I've got a couple of girls and they love tinkering with computers. And for me, I'd love for them to have a career in technology because it's something I'm passionate about. If it's what drives them, I would love to know, well, how can we attract more females to our industry? Because at the moment, it's very, very male-dominated.
Yeah, I think it really helps to have women leading technology parts of organisations, because I think you can be what you can see. But also, I think what's not clear, even to this day, is the diversity of roles within the technology field, right? We think it's about coding, right? Or infrastructure. It's like very few of the jobs are about infrastructure, and even lesser of the jobs will be about coding going forward. It is around transformation. It is around driving change. It is around engaging people and making people's lives better and redesigning processes and experiences. I feel like we have to do a better job, not just for girls growing up, but even within the current workforce, in sharing what those roles are and providing pathways. So we had, I think it was over 50% women in my team at Charter Hall, but 50%, it wasn't 50% of the jobs were deeply technical, right? They are project managers and VAs and solution architects, a bit technical, but it was like the front end facing transformation work was mainly done by women. So
it's interesting to hear, like, some people think, oh, it's the universities or tertiary education, like, you've got to get people in through that route, and then that will obviously automatically change it. I think you're right, the existing workforce is an untapped resource, because
I'm looking, when I was recruiting for roles in my team, I'm looking for people that have more real estate experience and technology experience, so I can teach them technology, right? But I can't teach them how to talk in the language of the industry. So I think we do have to think a little more laterally as recruiters, but also as leaders on who could do this job.
That's really interesting. No, I love your take on that one. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I love this question. Definitely, because I think I did this naturally, but God, it felt weird at the time, is follow your passion, don't follow the position, right? Don't do that climb up the corporate ladder. Follow where the passion is, and often roles will get created for you. Like, keep pivoting until you find yourself lit up. I think like something I've only discovered recently, and I wish I could tell my 20-year-old self, was everyone else feels like an imposter too, right? I thought it was just a women thing, and I thought it was just a me thing. But everyone feels like an imposter that is out of their comfort zone, and being out of your comfort zone is great because that's where you grow, right? That's where you learn. And then the thing that I've discovered since I left my CIO gig is you've got to spend as much time in the being than in the doing. I think we're so busy doing and hustling and answering emails and scrolling on social media. We're always busy doing something. And that's why we feel so burnt out. If we just spent time doing, for me, that's like hiking or relaxing with a glass of wine, if we just have that time where our brain gets a break, that's when the magic happens. It's like you get really grateful for all the things that you have rather than all the things you haven't achieved yet. I think that's when, that's often when the dots get connected in your brain, is when you're not busy doing something. So spend time just being.
I think the self-care thing's huge at the moment. As you're right, the world is busy with everything.
People wear it as a badge of honour. It's not a badge of honour, right?
Cool.
It's the way to burnout.
Yeah, it's not cool. It's absolutely not cool. And I think, it's a bit of an archaic way of looking at things, as like, I work myself to the bone. It's like, well, no, that's not.
I don't value it, right? If like anyone on my team that's working themselves to the bone, I'm like, that's the easiest way to burn out and autoimmune conditions. Stop. I'm not going to be responsible for that.
Maybe I'm a bit harsh, but when I hear that, I think inefficiency.
Yeah, totally. It's like all the inability to say no, and we've got to be able to say no.
And last question, what's next for Sheridan Ware?
Do you know, I'm always big on prototyping and testing and learning. I can't tell you what the definitive answer is to that. I have got lots of fingers in lots of pies. I'm spending a lot of time being, and, watch this space.
Fantastic. I look forward to it. Thank you very much for your time today. I really enjoyed this chat.
Such a pleasure.
No,
thank you for having me.
No, not a problem. If you've enjoyed our chat today, feel free to reach out to Sheridan or myself on LinkedIn, and keep an eye on the West Recruitment socials for our upcoming episodes.